The story begins with Grace. She is witnessing a girl, Sophie, falling from the rooftop of Cheongdam International High School. Grace also spots another girl standing on the rooftop but can't identify her. She screams for help, panicked and desperate. The next day, Grace receives a call from the school chairman. The chairman is attempting to protect the person responsible for pushing Sophie from the rooftop, framing it as an act of self-harm. In exchange for her silence, he offers Grace admission to the school as a way to help her escape her difficult life. Grace reluctantly agrees to the deal and is soon seen attending the prestigious school. 3 months ago, Grace is living a modest, lower-middle-class life. She travels by local bus and works part-time at a store after school to make ends meet. Frustrated by her circumstances, she wishes she had been born into wealth instead. The next day, she visits a wealthy family to tutor their only child. As she moves through the luxurious house, she is amazed by its grandeur. During their conversation, the child's mother inquires about Grace's qualifications and brags about their wealth. She stresses how important it is for her daughter to be accepted into Cheongdam International High School, where only the elite gain admission. After the tutoring session, Grace rushes back to her part-time job, just making it in time. Later, her old friend Layla visits her at the store. Layla, a university student, has lent Grace her university ID card, which Grace used earlier to pose as a university student during her interview for the tutoring job. She's doing this to help support herself financially. The next morning, Grace attends her old school. Due to the pressure of her studies, she experiences a nosebleed. Soon after, her teacher informs her that her scholarship application to New Zealand has been rejected. Despite her financial struggles, someone else in even greater need was awarded the scholarship instead. That evening, Grace evaluates her family's financial situation, realizing her father won't be able to support her in pursuing her dreams. Later, while tutoring the rich girl, Ava, Grace notices that Ava isn't really interested in studying. Ava spends her time posing in front of the mirror and taking pictures with her new designer bag. Ava, a middle schooler, is determined to get into Cheongdam International High School. She shows off her expensive bags to Grace, who is shocked at their price tags. Grace suggests that Ava shouldn't buy such costly things, but Ava teases her, offering Grace one of the bags mockingly. Grace briefly considers selling the bag to raise money for her New Zealand scholarship, but before she can act, Ava takes it back and ridicules her, saying that poor people like Grace don't understand luxury, which is why they advise against buying it. The next day, when Grace arrives at Ava's home, Ava's maid informs her that Ava will be late and invites her to wait in Ava's room. While waiting, Grace notices Ava's bag again and decides to pose with it in front of the mirror, posting a picture on social media. The following morning at school, Grace senses that her friends are acting strangely toward her. They confront her about applying for the New Zealand scholarship, as rumors have spread that Grace is wealthy. Confused, Grace retreats to the restroom and discovers that her photo with Ava's bag has gone viral. When Grace returns, her classmates bombard her with questions about whether her post was fake. In response, Grace lies, claiming that she is rich and that the bag is hers. Over the next few days, Grace continues arriving at Ava's house early, pretending to prepare study materials for her. In reality, she is trying on Ava's expensive clothes and posting pictures online to build her fame. Eventually, her classmates ask why she never wears these luxurious items to school. Grace lies again, saying she doesn't want to ruin her belongings. Around this time, she learns that Instagram influencers can make a lot of money if they have enough followers. Realizing this could be a way to fund her New Zealand scholarship, Grace becomes determined to gain more fame online. The following day, Grace goes to Ava's room again, arriving early. She finds Ava's school uniform hanging there. It's the uniform for Cheongdam International High School. Impulsively, Grace tries it on and takes a picture, posting it on social media. However, she soon hears that Ava has returned home earlier than expected. Panicking, Grace doesn't have time to take off the uniform, so she hides under the bed. Unfortunately, Ava finds Grace's phone and sees the posts she made on Instagram. Now Grace gets out from under the bed and tries to explain herself, but Ava confronts her. Ava then threatens Grace, saying that her mother will sue her if she finds out about what happened. In response, Grace pleads with Ava not to tell her mother, explaining that it would ruin her life. Ava agrees not to tell her mother, but on one condition: Grace has to do whatever Ava asks. Grace, feeling trapped, reluctantly agrees. From that point on, Ava begins making Grace do all her homework, chores, and even tasks for her friends, despite Grace's final exams being just around the corner. On the day of Grace's exam, just a few hours before it starts, Ava calls her in a panic. She forgot to take her notes to her interview and demands that Grace bring them to her. Although Grace knows she missed her exam, she feels compelled to help Ava and rushes to Ava's house to get the notes. When Grace arrives at Ava's school to deliver the notes, she overhears Ava talking to her friends. Ava is mocking her, bragging about how she's been using Grace as a personal maid and that all of her demands were just for fun. Ava then throws the notes in the trash and walks away. Heartbroken and overwhelmed, Grace breaks down in the washroom after realizing she has missed her final exam. In the washroom, she meets Sophie for the first time and learns that Sophie comes from a poor background like her and is being bullied at school. This encounter gives Grace the courage to take action. Fueled by anger, she fills a bucket with water and starts looking for the room where the interviews are being held. Along the way, she bumps into Nova, who is the daughter of the largest donor to Cheongdam International High School and is seen as the school's queen. Nova is rude to Grace, acting superior, and when Grace asks for directions to the interview room, Nova rudely brushes her off and walks away. Grace is still trying to locate the interview room, so she heads over to the information desk. There, she finds out where the interviews are taking place, and still furious with Ava, barges in. She pours the bucket of water over Ava in the middle of her interview. Afterward, Grace tells Ava she should work on her character before trying to join a school like Cheongdam. Shortly after, Ava's mother arrives at the school, having heard about what happened. She slaps Grace in the face and threatens to sue her, vowing to get Grace expelled from her own school as well. The next day, Grace is called into the staff room by her teacher, who is angry that she missed her final exam and for pretending to be rich. He's also worried that Grace will be expelled. Shocked and overwhelmed, Grace goes back to her classroom, only to find that news about her lying has spread like wildfire. Her classmates are gossiping and teasing her. Frustrated, Grace is about to leave the classroom when one of her classmates confronts her, telling her that she should feel ashamed. Fed up, Grace yells that she knows she lied and is sorry before storming out. After school, Grace goes to meet the chairman of Cheongdam International High School. She admits that everything is her fault and begs him to grant admission to Ava so that Ava's mother won't sue her. The chairman is dismissive, and Grace leaves the room feeling defeated. She heads straight to the restroom and starts crying uncontrollably. Unbeknownst to her, there is already a student named Logan in the restroom who comes from a wealthy family and is secretly smoking. Hearing Grace, Logan quickly hides his cigarette and tries to slip away without her noticing. However, Grace catches him and mistakes him for a pervert. She tries to attack him, but Logan explains that he's only there to smoke and that this restroom is avoided by other students because of some rumors. Recognizing Grace, Logan recalls that she was the girl carrying the bucket earlier. The following day, Grace leaves the school, still determined to speak with the chairman. She decides to wait for him in the parking lot. Logan shows up and helps her get across the barriers, marking the chairman's car for her to spot. However, as she waits, no one arrives, and by the time it's past 2 a.m., Grace gives up and heads home. As she's about to leave, she suddenly hears a loud noise. Someone has fallen. She turns to see Sophie lying on the ground after falling from the rooftop. Grace immediately panics, crying and screaming for help. Now at the hospital, Grace is being questioned by the police. She is overwhelmed and tearfully recounts the entire incident. Meanwhile, the chairman of the school receives a call from one of his staff members who is closely monitoring the police investigation. The staff member assures him that all the CCTV footage has been taken care of, but warns that Grace could still be a potential problem. The chairman replies that he will deal with Grace personally. The next morning, Grace is on her way back home from the hospital, trying to hide the bloodstains on her clothes. As she approaches her house, she sees Ava's mother standing outside, thanking her for speaking to the chairman about Ava's admission. She even hands Grace a gift and asks her to deliver it to the chairman. Grace is taken aback and doesn't understand the gesture. Later, when Grace returns home, she gets into an argument with her father about her school situation. Afterward, she receives a message from the chairman, asking her to call him. When she does, he offers her a scholarship to his school in exchange for keeping quiet in front of the police, framing Sophie's fall as a case of self-harm. Reluctantly, Grace agrees to his terms. Later, Nolan, a friend who is also on a scholarship at the school, visits Sophie in the hospital. He speaks with Sophie's mother, reassuring her that Sophie will recover soon. He then reflects on how both he and Sophie were bullied by Nova and her group, Nova had ordered her friends to find out, who reported her to the chairman. Though Sophie was the target, Nolan took the blame and ended up getting expelled. Nova taunted them, saying they were only suffering because they were born into poor families. Meanwhile, Nova is shown sleeping during a class. Her teacher calls her out, but she mocks the teacher by reading the board with perfect pronunciation, showing off her arrogance. In the present, Grace packs her things in class, ignoring the attempts of her classmates to bully her. As she leaves, another student enters, announcing that Grace has been accepted to Cheongdam International High School. Everyone is shocked as they watch her walk out. The following day, Grace receives her new school uniform. She tries it on and heads to the mall to buy a pair of shoes. While shopping, she buys an expensive pair, but as she's walking around, a girl wearing a cap deliberately bumps into her. The girl manages to slip a note into Grace's shopping bag. When Grace goes to the restroom to clean up, she finds the note in her bag. The note asks, "How does it feel to trade someone's life for a school admission?" Shocked, Grace rushes out to find the girl, but she's gone. Realizing she left her shoes behind in the restroom, she runs back only to find them missing. As Grace searches for her shoes, she sees Nova emerging from the restroom wearing the same shoes. Assuming Nova stole them, Grace confronts her, but Nova mocks her, asking if Grace even knows who she is. Nova humiliates Grace further, throwing a tissue in her face. Enraged, Grace loses her temper and attacks Nova, slamming her head against the wall and forcibly taking the shoes off her feet. Later, Grace is seen walking home with the shoes in a plastic bag. Meanwhile, Nova arrives at her house barefoot and extremely furious. A flashback shows Nova buying the shoes from the store earlier, making it clear that Grace had mistaken her for a thief. This misunderstanding enrages Nova, and she decides to get revenge on Grace. It's Grace's first day at the international school, and she explores different parts of the campus, feeling uncertain about how she fit into this new environment. Later, she picks up her school ID from her teacher, excited, but her excitement fades when she learns that Logan is assigned to be her guide for a school tour as part of his punishment. As they walk down the hall, Logan insists on showing her around and even grabs her hand. However, they are interrupted by Ethan, the chairman's son, and a friend of Nova. Ethan tries to take Grace away, and though Logan resists, Grace ultimately chooses to leave with Ethan. Ethan takes her to the park, introduces himself, and gives her his phone number, telling her to call if she ever needs help. Later that day, Grace starts stalking Ethan on social media and discovers he has been involved with another girl. While distracted by this, she bumps into some students, dropping her phone. After picking it up, she heads toward her locker. As she approaches, she notices students whispering and staring at her. It turns out that Nova has spread word about Grace, and everyone is curious about her. When Grace opens her locker, she is shocked to find a pair of shoes identical to hers along with a note that says, "Welcome to hell." This is when she realizes that Nova hadn't stolen her shoes. Later, Grace enters her classroom, but her classmates begin bullying her. Surprised that an ordinary girl would dare challenge Nova, she manages to escape, but the other students chase after her. In her attempt to flee, Grace ends up in the chairman's office and demands to know why he isn't protecting her. The chairman coldly replies that their deal only involved getting her into the school, and then he opens the door, directing her to leave. Grace sneaks out of the school building, but finds Nova waiting for her. They exchange words, though Grace still doesn't recognize Nova. Nova taunts her, calling herself the queen of the school. Soon, a crowd of students rushes toward them. Nova grabs Grace by the collar, but Grace headbutts her and escapes. Nova, now with a nosebleed, watches as the other students chase Grace. As Grace runs, Mia pulls her into an abandoned art room. Mia used to be rich and was once a friend of Nova. She gives Grace an old pair of sneakers, as Grace had been running barefoot. Mia informs Grace that Nova has circulated her picture to the school's group chat, and that Nova runs the Diamond Club, which consists of the children of the school's trustees. This club allows bullying, and Grace realizes that this is why she has been a target. Grace remembers that Ethan had given her his phone number, so she texts him for help. However, before she can act further, the bullies catch up and surround her. With no other option, Grace jumps from the second floor. Fortunately, Ethan appears just in time and cushions her fall, protecting her head from hitting the ground. Everyone is shocked, and Nova's friends rush to inform her of what just happened. Later that evening, Ethan takes Grace to the terrace and tends to her injuries. This moment makes Grace reflect on her childhood, remembering how other girls fantasized about being Cinderella, while she always believed that money could solve everything. She briefly imagines how marrying Ethan could make her problems disappear, but soon realizes that Ethan is in love with Sophie. Ethan further reveals that he had gotten Grace's information from her father's office and admits that the hairband he saw in his pictures belonged to Sophie. Upon hearing this, Grace tries to leave, but Ethan insists on finding out who pushed Sophie from the rooftop. Grace agrees to tell him, but only if he pretends to be her boyfriend at school and performs well in the task she sets for him. The next morning, Grace arrives at school in Ethan's car, and as they walk through the campus hand in hand, everyone is shocked to see them together. Some girls make fun of Grace, wondering how she managed to get Ethan to fall for her. Other members of the Diamond Group question Ethan about the situation, to which he confirms that Grace is now his girlfriend. Later, in class, the rich girls invite Grace to their sorority party as an apology for bullying her earlier. They lead her to believe that she's now part of their group and welcome to attend the party that night. Grace shares the news with Layla at the store, and Layla encourages her to go to the party to build good connections. However, Grace doesn't have a dress suitable for the event. They search online for one but can't find anything appropriate, so they turn to Ava to borrow a dress. Ava agrees, but places one condition. Grace must return the dress in the exact condition it was given to her. On the night of the party, Layla drops Grace off, but as soon as she enters, she feels out of place. Later, a waiter offers her a drink, and just as she's about to take a sip, someone pushes her, causing her to almost spill the drink on her dress. The girl who pushed her, Emily, a member of the Diamond Group, pretends it was an accident. She offers to help Grace up, but when Grace reaches for her hand, Emily pulls it back and mocks her. Soon after, Nova enters the club, making it clear that this whole setup was her plan to humiliate Grace. Nova orders the guards to throw Grace out, and although Grace tries to resist, she realizes the guards are under Nova's control too. They forcefully escort her out, leaving her upset. The next morning, Grace is seen holding the dress, which got stained the previous night. She's worried about how she repay Ava since the dress is worth $300. Later, Ethan confronts Nova at a hotel, furious with her for bullying Grace. Nova mocks him, claiming she knows he used to have feelings for Grace. She also accuses him of being naive, saying poor people like Grace use others to climb up in life, and then abandon them for someone wealthier, mentioning how her own father left her mother for someone richer. That night, Logan comes across a video of Grace being bullied and is shocked by what he sees. He then spots Grace talking to a stranger and, assuming the man is a predator taking advantage of Grace's innocence, he grabs him by the collar, ready to hit him. Grace quickly stops him and explains that she was just selling her expensive shoes to get some money. Feeling guilty, Logan offers to give Grace a ride home to make up for the misunderstanding. After getting home, Grace tries to figure out how many part-time jobs she needs to take on to repay Ava, feeling so overwhelmed that she bangs her head on her desk and falls asleep. The next morning, Grace is called into the teacher's office. The teacher tells her about a new scholarship opportunity that also includes housing and other expenses. As soon as she leaves the office, another girl deliberately bumps into her, and Grace discovers a sticky note on her back, realizing she's still being bullied by the rich students. Frustrated, she confronts Nova, asking her to leave her alone and stop the harassment. Nova coldly replies that Grace brought this on herself, and later adds that she can pay for Ava's dress if Grace agrees to leave the school within 7 days. The next day, Grace is waiting at the bus stop when Nova pulls up in her car, taunting her with a reminder that only 6 days are left. Furious, Grace is soon picked up by Ethan, who asks her what's bothering her. She admits she needs to borrow some money. Diane, who's with them, mocks her for worrying about money when her life is at risk. Grace then asks the driver to stop and gets out of the car. Ethan pleads with her to get back in, but she refuses. She then tells him that on the night Sophie fell, she couldn't see the face of the person responsible. Grace also adds that if he truly loved Sophie, he should have protected her from the bullying. The next day at school, Mia invites Grace to eat with her, as Mia feels lonely eating by herself. During their meal, Grace confides in Mia about the issue with Ava's dress. Mia then suggests an idea to make a large amount of money quickly, introducing Grace to another member of the Diamond Group, Finn. She continues by mentioning that Finn is part of the Diamond Group, but is viewed as poor because of his demeanor. Consequently, he faces bullying from the wealthier students who perceive him as an underprivileged peer. She suggests that Grace should approach Finn for financial help, assuring her that he would assist her. Grace sends him a message, and he calls her to his room. With no alternatives, she reluctantly goes to see him. Upon arriving at Finn's room, he informs Grace that he will give her $500, but in exchange, she must participate in a photo shoot with him. Grace agrees, and he has her try on various provocative outfits while asking her to pose in different ways. Eventually, she grows tired of posing and attempts to leave the studio, but Finn seizes her arm. He offers her an additional $300 if she changes into her college uniform in front of him. Feeling trapped, she concedes and changes for him. Later, a woman who is the mistress of Nova's father enters the school with another teacher. The teacher inquires how she managed to win over such a wealthy man, and they laugh together. Nova overhears their conversation, and upon spotting Nova, the mistress approaches her. She acts friendly in front of the teacher, but once the teacher leaves, she starts yelling at Nova, revealing that she is expecting a baby boy and plans to marry Nova's father. Nova experiences a panic attack upon hearing this, but the mistress continues to berate her. Suddenly, Grace appears and pretends to be a senior to Nova, helping her escape the situation. Afterward, Nova and Grace find themselves alone in a classroom, seemingly ready to resolve their conflict. However, their conversation turns heated, and Grace firmly states that she will not leave the school. In a bold move, she throws the money she received from Finn at Nova, asserting that she is now the most dangerous person around because she has nothing to lose. Nova agrees to her terms and promises to stop bullying her. In the days that follow, Grace tries to concentrate on her studies and keep a low profile at school. However, Ethan pretends to date Grace and asks her to meet him after class. They eventually meet on the grounds, where Ethan requests Grace's help with Sophie's case. He explains that his father is attempting to close the case and needs her assistance in finding evidence. Grace hesitates, wanting to maintain her low profile, but when she tries to walk away, Ethan threatens to reveal the truth to his father. He warns her that if his father learns that Grace doesn't know who the real culprit is, her scholarship will be at risk. Later, as Grace descends the stairs, she receives a text from an unknown number. Shocked, she discovers it contains a video of her from Finn's room. Overwhelmed by this, Grace feels despondent, and Mia unexpectedly appears to support her. Meanwhile, Nova and Emily notice Mia getting closer to Grace. That night, when Grace arrives home, she finds a note left by a girl in a cap in her shoe bag. Recognizing the handwriting as Mia's, she realizes that Mia is behind everything, including the theft of her shoes and the recording of her compromising video. A flashback reveals a year earlier when Mia's name was removed from the Diamond Group due to her family going bankrupt. This leads other students to mock her, which infuriates Mia, prompting her to lash out at one of them. The fight is broken up by Nova, who slaps Mia and admonishes her for no longer being part of their group, warning her to stay away. This remark stirs emotions in Mia, who reminds Nova of their long-standing friendship. In a chilling response, Nova whispers that she has been anticipating this moment her entire life. Back in the present, Nova encounters Mia in the school corridor and interrogates her about her sudden interest in Grace, reminding her that she has always looked down on less fortunate people. Mia does not respond positively, prompting Nova to walk away, bumping her shoulder against Mia in the process. Meanwhile, Ethan watches Nova from afar, suspecting that she was the one who pushed Sophie from the rooftop. Later, in Mia's room, Grace feels frustrated as she searches for evidence against Mia. Mia unexpectedly enters and catches Grace in the act. Grace confronts Mia, accusing her of being behind everything and demanding to know her motives. Mia mocks her, admitting to her involvement and threatening Grace, stating that she is unaware of who truly pushed Sophie that night, so she must name Nova as the culprit. In the meantime, Ethan walks into the Diamond Group room where Nova is already there with two other members. A flashback reveals Nova's last argument with Sophie right before she fell from the rooftop. Sophie had taunted Nova, claiming she was aware that Nova's father's mistress was expecting a baby. She also mentioned witnessing Nova's father drop off his mistress late at night. Back in Mia's room, Mia threatens Grace, insisting that if she doesn't name Nova as the guilty party, she will release Grace's stripping video online. Mia mocks Grace, saying she purchased the video from Finn and mentions that Finn had secretly recorded explicit footage in the Diamond Group room. That night, Grace is crying on the side of the road after the day's events when Nova spots her and stops her car. Nova inquires about Grace's tears and encourages her, saying that crying doesn't suit her. She adds that Grace looks better when she fights back. As Nova leaves, Grace receives a call from Mia, but chooses to ignore it. Instead, She calls Ethan and agrees to assist him in finding evidence against the real culprit. The following morning, Grace and Ethan pretend to be about to kiss in the Diamond Group room, successfully driving away Dylan, a member of the Diamond Group and Emily's fiancé. However, their true intention is to gather evidence against Finn. They search his drawers and discover several USB drives labeled with different students' names. Grace takes these drives home. Later, Grace asks Logan for help, and he beats up Finn, forcing him to delete all the videos from his laptop. That night, Grace watches one of the USB drives labeled Sophie and is stunned to see Dylan and Sophie making out. She gazes at the necklace Sophie had given her before her death and wonders who is really behind all this. The next day at school, Mia takes Grace to an abandoned restroom and tells her she has one day left to accuse Nova of being the culprit, or else Mia will leak Grace's video. Grace stands firm, insisting that Nova is not guilty. When Mia spots the pen drive labeled with Sophie's name, she accuses Nova of using it to blackmail Sophie. A flashback shows Sophie receiving her video with Dylan and crying in the restroom. Back in the present, Mia attempts to prove that Nova is blackmailing Grace, confronting her on the rooftop. She claims that this is why Sophie threatened Nova about exposing her father's affair. The struggle on the rooftop ends with Nova pushing Sophie off, but in truth, Mia is merely trying to manipulate Grace into seeking revenge on Nova. Mia departs, leaving Grace to ponder, while Logan, who overhears everything from his hiding spot in the restroom, catches up with her. They sit down together to brainstorm a solution to their predicament. Later that evening, everyone gathers to celebrate Dylan and Emily's 4th engagement anniversary. Ethan brings Grace to the party as his girlfriend. Grace notices that Nova seems disinterested and is sitting by herself. Ethan and Grace step outside for a walk, and Grace asks Ethan if he truly believes Sophie was a good person. Ethan affirms his belief in her, and they return to the party. Grace approaches Nova and inquires about the necklace Emily is wearing. Nova informs her that this particular necklace is so exclusive that even wealthy individuals cannot obtain it due to a long waiting list. This raises Grace's suspicions about Emily, reminding her that she gave Emily the same necklace before her fall from the rooftop. Subsequently, Nova and Ethan get into an argument. Nova expresses her frustration that Ethan has forsaken their friendship for a girl, clarifying that she didn't bully Sophie because of her poverty, but because she was cheating on him with Dylan. Hearing this, Ethan confronts Dylan angrily, causing Emily to burst into tears. Later, Emily and Nova find themselves alone, and Nova feels guilty for revealing the truth. However, Emily's demeanor shifts as she admits she was already aware of the situation. She confidently states that she now holds power over Dylan and intends to forgive him for his infidelity. After the party, Grace takes Nova home and shows her the necklace Sophie had given her the night before her fall. Grace accuses Emily of being the one who pushed Sophie off the rooftop. A flashback reveals the rooftop confrontation where Emily and Sophie are fighting, leading to Emily accidentally pushing Sophie off. During her fall, Sophie grabs Emily's necklace. The following day, Grace receives a text from Mia, demanding to meet on the school rooftop, threatening to release Grace's video if she doesn't comply. Rushing to the school, Grace arrives just as Mia is about to upload the video, but an unknown assailant pushes Mia off the rooftop. Mia falls in the exact spot where Sophie once did, and Grace witnesses this eerily similar incident, leading her to believe that the school is cursed. So this is the conclude of this story. Now subscribe for Season 2.